guys, welcome back to Cyberspace Investigations. When Shigeru Miyamoto was a child, he would go exploring in forests near his house. He would later go on to turn this experience into a video game for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Now, I can go exploring in forests too. Miyamoto isn't special. So why don't we do it and make a great game off of it? I'm coming for you, Miyamoto. The Legend of Zelda released in 1986 for the NES, and it was one of the best games for the system, there's no question about it. After Super Mario Bros., Miyamoto was already a great developer at Nintendo, but he wasn't done yet. A separate team was setting to work creating Super Mario Bros. 2, a devilishly hard game we'll probably cover later. Miyamoto gave small amounts of help and insight on the sequel, but as far back as the development of the first Mario, he'd thought of creating a polar opposite pillar game to Mario. Miyamoto created a game concept about exploring a large open world with items to find, dungeons to explore, and complete, utter freedom. So they set to work creating a story, gameplay, and a layout for the game. Early concepts show the game was originally going to be time travel based, but that was changed early on. What wasn't changed from that concept was the main character's name, Link. He served as the link between the past and future, something that would be revisited in a few later installments. They settled on 8 dungeons, which could be completed in any order as long as you had the tools, and plenty of really obscure secrets that were too ridiculous to find. Like seriously, was I supposed to try to burn every bush in the map to find the one hidden door? Despite the very ahead of its time concept, the game is still rooted in archaic design. Moving in only 4 directions and not being completely locked to a grid makes combat a chore with a lot of the tougher enemies. You'll know what I mean if you've played the game. So, nature was closed today, so the building yard will have to do. 1700s discs won't be my inspiration this time. We gotta look and find something. Miyamoto found plenty of stuff when he was exploring his forest, or at least I hope so. So, I guess we should start looking. Well, maybe we could make a game about shoveling leaves and making them into a pile, and then jumping into that pile and doing all the work over again. That might be fun. Well, what am I thinking? No, it won't be. You know, I think a stone hopping game might work. Like if you start here, then you go down and down and down and down and down and you know, that was a bit exciting. But I don't think that would work well as a game. Maybe as an arcade one, but we're not going now. We're going for the AAA audience. So, is it getting colder? I mean, I know it's the middle of winter, but it's not supposed to be this cold, right? Ah, great. Fun times. The overworld is a full 16x8 grid of screens, each space holding something unique like different layouts, enemy types, color palettes, textures, and even unlockable secret areas. They accidentally left out a ton of stuff, but brought it back in the second quest mode unlocked after beating the first game. It works out because if the game was much larger than this, it might be a bit overwhelming, though the size might have added to the spectacle of the game. Either way, it's all still there. The combat is pretty simple, but it is clunky. Link controls like a tank, and the range of the sword is absolutely dismal. This combines with the slightly off-grid placement to create a fairly tough combat system, but not in a good way. It's really simple, with only one button to attack with the sword. This makes it so the sword could possibly be off-center with the hitbox of the enemies, and some of these enemies are cheap. Enemy variety is abundant here. There are snakes, moblins, octoroks, dragons, dodongos, mouth things in the desert, annoying bouncy things all over the place. Yeah, these things might be Zoras, but I can't tell, and freaking Lionels. The one Breath of the Wild enemy I never wanted to see again. Ever. Yep, all of these enemies make it a very fun experience. I add a lot of hesitation to that statement because while the game is enjoyable, the enemies all feel archaic and don't make me feel like I died because of my own fault because the enemies are so tough and sporadic, and Link isn't agile enough to fight them effectively half the time. However, with enough skill and time, you can get used to the combat system, though you shouldn't have to get good at an off-kilter combat system. Getting worse. Oh, I went the wrong way. Oh, it's locked. Never mind. We didn't go the right way. We gotta go. The cold's getting to me. In terms of graphics, this game looks really good for an early NES game. It's certainly nothing compared to even what Zelda 2 would a few years later. I think this is because of the way the screen stays static most of the time, bar for when you're transitioning screens. The normal effect on NES games from not playing them on a CRT TV doesn't apply as hard here. The enemies are simplistic, but not so simplistic you can't tell what they're supposed to be, except sometimes. Some of these enemies are strange and I can't tell what they are. Other than that, these designs are competent enough. The world and story this game built was pretty interesting, seeing as this was supposed to be a more story-driven game than other ones on the NES. Well, as story-driven as an 8-bit game can get. What's interesting about not only this game, but the lore of the series, is because despite being the first game in the series, it's at the end of one of the timeline splits, which it means that even though this game is based more off of Christian Europe than the distance it took from the series in Link to the Past, it means that something like Christianity kind of developed in the downfall of Hyrule, which that was pretty retconned later down the line, starting with Link to the Past, and the rest of the games going for the Golden Goddesses and Triforce sort of approach, rather than the Triforce just being something that was kind of there and then broken. Ganon is the same way. It's just a strange byproduct of creating a story after establishing a world with very little story many years later. But what is the final verdict on The Legend of Zelda? I have to say, it is considered the first action RPG in existence, and it's still a fun time even today. However, it's probably not a great place to start for the series, or generally NES games at all. You really need a guide to fully play this game and enjoy it, because everything else is really cryptic, lost in translation, or just invisible unless you have Nintendo-powered guides that are no longer in production. It's a pretty good game, though. Well, the storm's passed, but I don't have any inspiration. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave the game making to Miyamoto. I guess I'll just stick to whatever this is. Jared, what's the definition of this? A scam?